the biggest selling album of 1998. Please welcome the Corrs.
How lucky we are to be doing what we're doing, to be working at something that we're talented at.
It really is a tremendous relief and a tremendous sense of fulfillment to have achieved as much as we have.
If you work hard enough, anything can happen. It is beyond our dreams.
We can play together, get on the stage, have the same dream, share in that. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Feelings mutual. I swear it.
Hi, this is Tricia Walker from Mississippi. I co-wrote the song Looking in the Eyes of Love, which was recorded by the Corrs, and I'm so glad it was. You're listening to CorrsCast. Thanks for tuning in.
Hi, and a warm welcome to episode 24 of CorrsCast. For this episode, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter Tricia Walker, with specific focus on a song she co-wrote in 1989 named Looking in the Eyes of Love, a song that will be all too familiar to fans of the band The Corrs. She shares of her leaving home at a young age to pursue a career in songwriting, and how a music executive's kind feedback set her on a path to fulfill the aspirations she had. Listen as Tricia tells us of the inspiration behind the song's lyrics, and the advice that when you love something, it's always worth taking the risk. Enjoy. Tricia, thank you so much for agreeing to be on. There were some emails back and forth, and I originally reached out to you well over a year ago. So it's been a time coming, but a time I believe that is worth the wait. Thank you so much for being and agreeing to come onto CorrsCast.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I offer an apology. If you emailed me a year ago and I didn't see it, then obviously I was not paying attention to my social media, but I'm delighted to be here now.
Really, really glad to have you here. I can already tell from your voice, and people would say your vibe, this might be a fun one.
Oh, good. Oh, I expect it will.
This season is focused on their second album, Talk on Corners, released in 97. But the track that the Corrs fans would know you for wasn't released officially until the year 2000 as a bonus track on their next album, In Blue. But many fans may not know that the song was originally intended to be part of the lineup for Talk on Corners, and in the running order was going to be played after the song When He's Not Around. We're obviously talking about Looking in the Eyes of Love. Tricia, this show is kind of twofold. We talk about the Corrs, we talk about those they worked with or alongside in how they developed their music and their sound, whether it be a session musician, whether it be co-writing or covering a song in this instance. But it's also a telling of what the music industry was like in the 90s. And maybe before with this track specifically. But I always ask my guests, so that the listeners have some idea of the background, how did you get into songwriting, and what was your story prior to the song we know as Looking in the Eyes of Love?
Sure, I'm happy to share that. Well, and actually I'm coming to you today from a town in the Mississippi Delta called Cleveland, Mississippi, which if you get out your map of the United States, is 100 miles directly south of Memphis, Tennessee, on the Great Blues Highway, Highway 61. Now, I grew up about 3 hours further south on Highway 61 in a very small town called Fayette, Mississippi. About 1,600 people were during the heyday, and it's probably about the same today. But I grew up in Mississippi. I had a wonderful music teacher when I was a child. I went away to college. I was actually a music major at Delta State University, which is here in Cleveland, Mississippi. And then after I graduated, I did go ahead and earn a graduate music degree, and I was still living in Mississippi, but your listeners will remember that back in these dark ages, this was before the computer age, before any kind of digital technology. So if you were going to try to be in the music business in the United States, you typically had to go to New York or Los Angeles or Nashville. And New York from my hometown was way too big, and Los Angeles was way too far away, and Nashville was within one day's drive of my mother's house. So, and I didn't necessarily grow up listening to country music. I grew up listening to soul music, and I was classically trained, so I listened to classical music and blues and jazz and gospel, and country came to me late, but I decided to go ahead and move to Nashville, pack the truck. This was in 1980, if you can believe that. So again, no computers. Yep. All your information was on 3x5 index cards, and I didn't know anybody when I moved. So it was 500 miles away. And I was very fortunate, though. Nashville then was different than it is now. It's just exploded these days. It's just almost unmanageable. But back still in 1980, and I was there from 1980 to 2006, that was a great time to be in Nashville because the creative community was pretty well located kind of in one area of the city, so you could get around easily. And all the music businesses and publishing houses and most of the recording studios were within just a 2 or 3 mile radius. So everything was very concentrated, which made it easy for newcomers to meet people and find out who the other songwriters were. I had started writing what looked like poetry probably when I was in the seventh or eighth grade. And then um, again, I took piano from the time I was 6 years old, but I didn't get my
Wow.
first guitar until I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. And then I got my mom and dad bought me a relatively inexpensive guitar from a local hardware store, which just about made my fingers bleed to learn how to play three chords. But it was enough to hook me. And so, so I learned how to play guitar, which came in very handy when I moved to Nashville. And so I started writing what kind of looked like songs. Nobody taught you how to write songs back then. You just kind of had to figure it out. These days, there's university programs and all kinds of opportunities. But back then, you just had to kind of learn it by osmosis, listening to the radio, watching people play. So when I moved to Nashville, I had already been writing. I mean, I was still what I would consider a young writer, but I moved to Nashville and fell in with the songwriting community, which was just an amazing group of people. And so that's how I got started.
A lot of people I interview, that seems to be the case. Even on this album and the album prior, there's a sense of leaving home and taking a giant leap as your vocation. That's very unheard of now. Everything's a lot more, I guess, safe and I better not do that, and financially constrained. Whereas it's you going where your heart's taking you by the sounds of it, especially with music.
Oh yeah, when people ask me about this, I have a distinct memory. I don't know the day or the time, but I have a distinct memory of realizing because I was living in Jackson, Mississippi, and I was playing at night in some restaurants and bars and playing cover songs and becoming interested in how to write original songs. But I distinctly remember feeling like I would never be satisfied if I didn't go try. The fear of going and failing was not near as large as the fear of not going to try at all. And now some of that
Wow.
may be based in ignorance, the ignorance of youth, but that's what got me in the truck was like, I got to go try this, and if it doesn't work out, I'll come home.
And I guess it's really nice to hear that you had that backup plan. You've always got, I can always just go home, right?
Hmm.
That's lovely because a lot of creatives these days, they don't have that backup. They have no financial backing. They've got no exposure, as they say, and they don't have that home to rely back onto.
Hmm.
So that's lovely to hear that you had that. When it came to those first steps into songwriting, what was that like? Was it a lot of misses, or did you suddenly hit the ground running with a superb first song and then you just bloomed from there? How was those first few for you?
Well, I can tell you, no, I've got songs in a box under my bed that no one will ever hear because they were some of those first iterations of songs and they will never see the light of day except for me. But it was a way to work on the craft. I will tell you
Mm.
this, and again, it's a reflection of the time that I was in back before the digital age. In the mid to late 70s, there was one publication. It was based out of Los Angeles. It was called Songwriter Magazine. And it was I subscribed to it. I saved my pennies and I subscribed to it because it was very helpful for somebody out, in the hinterlands trying to learn this business. But it had very practical information. How do you make a demo? And in the front of that magazine, they would always list a professional person's name and contact information, usually one from New York, one from LA, and one from Nashville. And so you actually had a face and a name and a phone number, which one of those turned out to be one of the first people I contacted when I moved to Nashville and began to be my way in. So, and I still have a box of those songwriter magazines. And it's really
Wow.
funny now to go back and look at the advertisements for the technology 40 years ago. I don't know if you remember, if any of your songwriter fans that are listening remember when the Tascam company put out the first It was called a Porta Studio.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could multi-track. Oh my gosh, that just changed our world. You could sing harmony with yourself. So that blew my mind. And I thought, and that's when I actually began to really grow a love of production as well. But those first few, the thing about Nashville, and I hope they never lose this, I moved to Nashville 2 years before the Bluebird Cafe was actually established. The Bluebird
Wow.
Cafe is the premier listening spot in Nashville. When that Bluebird community began to form, and you would go and hear songwriters, I mean, that's like going to school. You go and you could kind of stack your songs up against what you were hearing, and either you were thinking, okay, I'm kind of getting in the ballpark here, I'm getting close, and then you'd hear something brilliant, and you either had to tuck your tail between your legs and go home, or it was very inspiring, and you think, okay, I've got to get as good as that. And I'll share this. This was a fun story. Before I actually made the full move, I made a couple of trips up to Nashville, and the drive time from where I was living to Nashville at the time was about 10 hours. So I would go up and spend a weekend and just try to learn about the city. And because of this magazine, it told you the proper way to make an appointment with a publisher and to take back then it was cassette tapes, to
Yeah.
take your cassette tape in with your typed lyric. So I had an appointment with a gentleman at Acuff Rose Publishing, which was one of the old publishing houses in Nashville. And I was green. Oh boy, I was a rookie, but I took my tapes in, and I don't know what song I gave him, but he gave me some time, and he put my song in and listened to it. And I'll never forget, he was very kind. He didn't crush my spirit, but he took a record. It was the number one record that week. I think the record was by Barbara Mandrell, and it was a song that was written by Tom Schuyler, who later came to be a friend of mine in the Bluebird circles. And it was a song called Years After You. And he put it on and he played it. And when the song finished, he said, now, if you're going to do this, you've got to write something as good or better than that.
Wow.
And that was his way of encouraging me without crushing me. And I got it. I thought, okay, I might be a big fish in a small pond, but I have jumped in the deep end here. I've got to up my game. So I'll never forget that. And that, I think, is what I hope will always separate Nashville from some of the other music cities, is that people were still kind. They were straight up. They would tell you the truth, but they wouldn't try to just crush your ego or crush your talent, but give you some encouragement, because you never knew where that next song, that good song, was going to come from. You just didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's encouragement is it, but it could be that person that's right in front of you in 2 weeks' time suddenly makes something that's life-changing for them and their company. So yeah, you telling me that story, I've got hairs standing up on my arms. It's amazing. It's lovely to hear that you were encouraged rather than just dismissed. They could have just gone on about why your song isn't good, whereas they can see you're green, you're coming in, you've got your demos, you're making the move towards that industry, and they're going, no, here's something on the horizon that I'm just going to pinpoint for you. Just keep walking towards that.
Exactly.
We may be stepping forward a bit, but would you say that you've made great leaps towards that horizon or surpassed it?
Well, I think, I've gotten close to it a few times. The thing about, at least my perception of songwriting, it's such a mysterious process. You can't afford to just wait until inspiration strikes. All the songwriters, our little group that I remember running with in Nashville, we would talk about who would have their radar up that day, because all the great song ideas are floating out there in the world. So it just depends on who's got their radar up that day to catch one. But the catching of it is the inspiration. But then after that comes the hard work of just construction, building the house. You've got to have written through enough bad songs to make your craft better, so that when you get that good idea, when you catch that one in the radar, then you've got your tools handy and you can really go to work and make it a great song. So, there's so much mystery, like I say. So there's a few songs that feel like, for me, feel like I was just holding the pen, and they just, it came through me. I still had to work at it, but when it was done and I could put the pencil down and look back and go, wow, that was more than just me that did that. And so there have been a few of those, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Yeah, I've heard many, many songwriters interviewed and heard this kind of, it's coming from somewhere else. It's just coming through me, which is just beautiful, and very, very spiritual, very spiritual. Yeah,
absolutely.
So you've been given this song and you're like, you need to do the same, if not better than this. Where did you go from there to then working for Polygram? What's the bit in the middle?
Well, when I first moved to Nashville, and again, I was so proud of my little Porta Studio 4-track demos. The first open doors I had were actually at a relatively new company called Word Music, which was a gospel music company their headquarters were actually in Texas, but they had decided to open a Nashville office. And so they were beginning to staff up their publishing company. And, everything's about networking. And I had started going to a church in Nashville where a lot of the local musicians went, and particularly those who were involved in the contemporary Christian music scene. And so one of my friends had gotten a job as the receptionist at this new Word Music publishing. And so I had my little four-track cassette tape, and I took it in to her one day, and I said, "Hey, take a listen to this." And she said, "Well, I will." And she said, "I'll play it for the guys in the back." Well, one of the guys in the back was one of the guys that I saw his name and address in Songwriter magazine that I had mentioned. His name was Bubba Smith. He's still in Nashville. And, whoever listened to it liked it. And so my first open door was they offered me 2 single song contracts. And at this point, I had been in Nashville for probably about a year until that first door cracked open. And so they offered me, actually, I take that back. It was four single song contracts on 4 songs, and they were all in that contemporary Christian music vein. And then about 6 months after that, they signed me as an exclusive writer, one of their 5 writers that they signed to their new company there. So I wrote for them for 5 years, and then some of the personnel changed, and I felt like I wanted to try to get into a little bit of the wider Nashville country music market. So when my contract was up there, then Polygram, offered me a position there to write for them.
And how did Polygram know of you? Just from your networking, or? Just
networking. The man that I worked with was actually one of Jerry Kennedy's sons, Brian Kennedy, who he's had huge Garth Brooks hits and all that. So Brian and his 2 brothers, and they all kind of worked in the business with their dad. And Brian was friends with another young man that I had been writing with named Dan Roberts. So they were good friends. And so we just connected through networking. Yeah. It just, hanging out.
It's, sometimes in the industry, I guess it really is who you know, not what you know. But then there's a bit of what you know as well, right?
Oh, well, there's 2 ways. I think, and I tell young people this today, you still have to learn the proper and, the business way to go about it. You make your appointments and you go play your tapes. And then there's the backside where you've always got, again, back then, cassette tapes. You'd always have a cassette in your pocket or your purse just in case you ran across somebody like the receptionist who, so you got to play it both ways.
It sounded like you really did. The song Looking in the Eyes of Love. Tell us more of that. Was that one of those songs for you? It's a co-write, correct?
It is a co-write with Costas Lazarides. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. He and I were both writing at the same time for Polygram Music. I had been signed as a staff writer for Jerry Kennedy and his publishing company underneath the Polygram umbrella. And Costas was on staff. And so as I recall, the publisher that I was most day-to-day with, he set up these appointments with, because I think at the time Polygram had probably 30 or 40 writers on staff, so he was kind of matchmaking. And so he put Costas and I together one day. And, I don't remember a lot about it other than we both got out of our notebooks. And, one of us came across the title. Honestly, I can't remember if it was my title or his. I think he had the little musical lick, the da da dum da 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 dum dum da da dum that starts the song. I think
Mhm.
Costas had the little melodic lick. And then we just kind of knocked it back and forth. I don't at the time I didn't think it was anything particularly like it was one of the special ones, and yet somehow it turned out to be the one that was. Um, and so that's what I remember about the process. And Patty Loveless cut it before Allison did.
Yeah, in 1990, right? That's, yeah.
Right, right.
Can you remember when this would have been written?
Oh, it would have been probably 88 or 89.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I did find I was going through some papers the other day, and I actually came across some old demo session budgets, and I found the session that "Looking in the Eyes of Love" was
No
on,
way. Oh,
and it was in the same session. Costas had some great hits. It was on the same session with Timber, "I'm Falling in Love" for Patty Loveless, and maybe one more that she did. She and Costas really had a good thing. Several of his songs were hits for her as well.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to be able to see that if possible. That would be a great addition to the show notes to have
Yes, I'll
a picture
I'll
of that or something. Yeah.
yeah, I'll picture it or scan it or something, get it to you. Mm-hmm.
And does it have the date?
It does.
Oh, that's really cool. Pinpointing those kind of dates is, yeah, it's really key to this strange archive I'm doing, I guess. Do any recordings still exist of that original demo?
Yes, I have a male and a female version of it. I think I'm probably singing the female version, and I think Costas is probably singing the male version, and I can share those with you as well.
Oh, wow. That would be tremendous just to see where that original version came from.
Yeah.
And how it's developed through.
I wonder, should I tell you about all the crazy things I've ever done? I've been a rebel all my life, and when I should have stayed, I tried to run. In a world of strangers, I was searching for an answer, but what I found was never enough. Until I found you, now I'm looking in the eyes of love. Darling, you've been good to me, so much more than I deserve. I never thought I'd ever find someone who's so sweet and kind like you. So please believe me when I say this time I won't run away, and I swear by all of heaven's stars above, now that I found you, I'm looking in the eyes of love, looking in the eyes of love. I can see forever, I can see you and me walking through this world together. Oh, my heart's found the home I've been dreaming of. Now that I found you, I'm looking in the eyes of love. Now that I found you, I'm looking in the eyes of love.
So you have this song. It's nothing particularly out of the ordinary, but you're okay with it. You've got a male demo and a female demo of the song. Is there much that you're aware of on the story of how Patty Loveless was to then release this in 1990 as part of her On Down the Line album?
hmm Well, I was just delighted that it was on the album, and I was hoping, and I don't know what the top three singles were off that record. You may can pull that quicker than I can. I was
Hmm.
so hopeful, being a young songwriter, that that was going to be the fourth single. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get a single, yay! And of course, it never was the fourth single. They just went with three singles off that particular album, and then they went to her next album. And so it sort of, I thought, well, it had done its thing. Well, at the time, Allison's manager was a lady named Denise Stiff, and she ran in a circle kind of with some of the women executives on Music Row, and I had gotten to meet her at some point. And it was somewhere near the holiday season, going into the November, December season. And I got a phone call from her, and she said, "Hey, can you send me over the lyrics to Looking in the Eyes of Love?" And I'm like, "Well, sure. What's going on?" And she said, "Well, had anybody called to tell you that Allison is going to record your song?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Allison Krauss is going to record my song." And um and so that's how I found out that she had recorded it and that it was going to be a single. And I was just thrilled, because I'm a huge Allison fan. She's just like cream of the crop.
It's such a wonderful song anyway, but yeah, Alison is one of those staple names that is just cemented, especially with her connection with Union Station. And that was released in kind of like early 97, wasn't it? March 97.
That sounds about right.
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm,
Do you have
mhm.
any knowledge of when she recorded it?
I don't, and I don't think there's anything in my records that would show that, but I would say, sometime either, you know, latter half of 96 probably, if it was released in the spring of 97. She's just got such a beautifully unique voice. I mean, there's just no other voice. It's kind of like Dolly Parton's voice. There's no other voice like Dolly. There's no other voice like Allison.
Hmm. I tremendously agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What was that like to hear her version of your song for the first time?
Oh my God. I don't know that there's anything more exciting. And it's sad because I don't know that today the young writers, it's like nothing to put your song on streaming these days. But back in
Mm,
the day, to get your song on the radio was, huge. And so, I remember hearing it and, probably pulling over the side of the road if I was in my car and just listening and, and weeping, going, oh my gosh, I've got a song on the
you've
radio. I
done
mean,
it.
that was the mountaintop. Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
mountaintop. Mm.
Am I right in saying that it was? Did it win a? Did it win a Grammy, or was it nominated for a Grammy?
Her performance did win a Grammy. I'm sitting here looking at I have a certificate on the wall saying that I wrote the song that she won the Grammy for. But yeah, she's got the statuette on the So
Yeah,
Wrong, So Wrong album. But yeah, she
that's it.
did. She did win a Grammy for that performance of that song.
You must be so proud of that.
I'm very proud of it. I'm so very proud. Again, I'm in my little studio room. I have back in the days when they gave out the gold and platinum
Mm,
plaques, and sitting right there looking at it. I remember hearing her do it live at Fanfare, what used to be called Fanfare in Nashville. It's called CMA Fest now, but back in the day it was called Fanfare, and she uh she just did such a tremendous job. And I was actually listening. I've been listening to the Corrs all day, and I pulled up their version on YouTube
hmm.
and reading a lot of the comments. And I knew this, but I was reminded once again of how many people began to use that as a wedding song. A
Yeah.
lot of people use that song as a wedding song, which just, makes me happy. So,
It's like on a day as special as that, when you're thinking of love and commitment long term, the
yes,
lyrics really speak for themselves, right?
yes,
It's
yes,
gorgeous. We'll get, if possible, a picture of the certificate into the show notes for listeners so they can
sure. Happy
clap
to do
along
that.
and see that as part of the show. It'd be cool. You touched on it there. So the Corrs, obviously, that's why this connection today is happening and why I'm speaking to you, because the Corrs, they produced a first album, which was really homegrown and then American produced in part with David Foster. We've got second album, Syndrome. We've got them trying to break America. They're starting to co-write with many, many people. And this song was produced at Chartmaker Studios with David Foster. at the helm, who obviously has heard the Paddy Loveless version.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not there's any influence of the Alison Krauss version, it's similar, right, in vocal.
Mm-hmm.
But the Paddy Loveless is really the patination of the voice. It seems that Andrea had heard that prior.
Mm-hmm.
What's your first understanding of, or first hearing of, the Corrs potentially covering it as well?
Oh gosh, I'm always appreciative as a writer when a recording artist really, stays true to the nuts and bolts of the song. And like I mentioned, and I think it was Costas who probably came up with the little musical hook, because that just, for me, for any of the versions I've ever heard, including the Corrs, that signature lick, and not everybody does that. Some people like take off and kind of do their own thing. So as a writer, because that's what I hear in my head, so I'm very appreciative that they stayed true to that, and just a lovely performance, great interpretation. Again, some of the comments I was reading were like, "Oh, I like this version better than Alison Krauss's. It's so great," So everybody hears it. Everybody hears it differently, but I think they did a tremendous job, and I'm so grateful that they recorded it.
It was really cool to, earlier in the season, speak to those that were privy to the original album lineup, and seeing the name, looking in the eyes of love there, I knew I had to reach out and at least try and say hi and discuss the song with you, because it was very, very nearly on that album lineup.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's a great song. I guess it is more country than the rest of the album, and they were looking to break a pop America, I guess, more.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe further down this season of the podcast, I'll hear more as to why it was cut. But it was definitely more than a contender for the album. They'd spent money going out, recording it, mixing it, mastering it, and it was on that running order until the very last months. So it's such a shame. I'm glad it did finally see the light of day in their next release's special edition.
Yes. Those are the hard moments in the music business, when you think you've got one on a record and all of a sudden it's not on there anymore. But yeah, I'm like you. I'm glad it saw the light of day, and delighted that, like I say, when I see comments on it on YouTube, that, people are hearing it and loving it, and that makes me happy.
Can you remember at which part you were informed that the band were going to cover it?
I'm not really sure, unless there was a connection with my friend Buddy Green. Do you know Buddy Green?
No.
Buddy is a tremendous instrumentalist. Again, we connected first through the contemporary Christian music scene, but is a great lover of Celtic music and Irish music. And Buddy co-wrote the great Christmas song, "Mary, Did You Know?" It might have been Buddy that heard it and said, "Hey, did you know that this Irish group cut your song?" I'm like, "No, I didn't know." So, it was probably Buddy Green who shared that with me.
Who just shared it, and you were like, "What?
Yeah,
There's another one."
Yes.
Wow.
And grateful for it.
Honing in on the lyrics specifically, is there any phrasing or parts of the writing of this song that stand out in your mind when you think of this song as a whole?
People ask me a lot of times, what do you write first, the lyrics, the music? And I really, I don't know that I can give a clear-cut answer, but 80% of the time, I like to know the story going in. I really like to tell the story and then find the right music. And in this case, Costas did such a great job of pairing that melody with the story. But, I do remember, the first lines, I wonder, should I tell you about all the crazy things I've ever done? That moment of hesitation of, can I really be totally honest with this person? Because, if I really tell them all the things I did, they might walk away from me. So there's a risk involved there. I wonder, should I tell you about all the crazy things I've ever done? I've been a rebel all my life. That was a little bit of probably a nod to a mascot for a team here in Mississippi called the Rebels. I've been a rebel all my life, and when I should have stayed, I tried to run. It's that risk. Anytime we love and love completely and love with a whole heart, it requires a great amount of risk, and there's a real risk of damage to your heart if it doesn't work out. So is it any wonder that people hesitate to take that risk? So I do remember that feeling behind the lyrics of, ooh, I don't know if I should tell you everything, but now that I've found you, I can see it. I can see it. I'm looking in the eyes of love. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay because I'm looking in the eyes of love. So I do remember that feeling behind the writing of it.
That's wonderful.
Mm.
That is beautiful to hear back.
Mm.
What life experience led you to write it?
Oh, probably already having had a broken heart a few times or two, and
Mm.
again feeling that risk of can I, can I put my heart out there again? I don't know. It's risky. I don't know if I can do it, but because I think you have to have some lived experience. I mean, that's why I wonder sometimes if not that young people don't have experiences, but you've got to live a little bit to really develop some depth, I think, in your lyrics.
And I think the Corrs at this point, they'd spent 5-6 years demoing and creating that first album,
Mm-hmm.
and then spent a number of years promoting it,
Mm-hmm.
and touring it. Where's the life experience outside of that tour and promotion bubble to actually now find time to find fresh lived experience to influence that second album's writing? When, all right, yeah, we've just finished touring in January, we're going to take a couple of weeks break, and now we're going to go and write with going to go back with David Foster, and then we're going to talk to Glenn Ballard and Billy Steinberg, and it's very tricky.
It is very tricky. I mean, I think, of course, being on the road and being in that bubble of being on the road and touring and promoting, I mean, life still goes on inside that bubble, and in some ways provides a great amount of fodder for lyric writing if you're paying attention to it. I do think it's important, and if it's one thing, I think if artists that are on the road, if they are also songwriters, but whether they are or whether they aren't, I think it's really important. And again, I see this as a challenge for today's young writers. You've still got to find some time to be quiet enough to hear the voices in your head and in your heart. And I think there's so much distraction these days with devices and social media that it's hard to be still anymore and really hear the deep ideas that are trying to bubble up in you. But it's important. So I hope the Corrs as a group or as individuals have been able to, guard that time. It's hard to do. It's very hard to do, particularly if you're as active as they are, in that period as well. Mm-hmm.
And now going on to have families, and
Right.
those demands of time are stretched even further. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky.
Right.
Yeah. We can only fingers crossed and hope for more, that somebody will give them enough free headspace to write even more that we love and enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Baby, you've been good to me. Oh, so much more than you could know. Yeah. I never thought that I would find someone who's so sweet and kind like you. Please believe me when I say this time I won't run away. I swear by all the heaven stars above. Now that I found you, I'm looking in the eyes of love. Looking in the eyes of love.
You specifically touched on having that, that heartbreak experience several times, and that's where you were going from. Putting that heart on the line again is a risky thing, but surely, and I'd love to hear your comment on this. So is writing and putting that onto a page in front of another human being when they don't know your lived experience, and the people that are hearing your lyrics don't know your lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you've pushed this baby out into the world of this song,
Mm-hmm.
but what's it like to open up in that writing session and just put it down? Does it feel freeing, or does it feel very vulnerable, or is it a mix?
I think it takes some experimentation with your different writers. Now, over the course of my career, I don't mind writing by myself at all. I feel capable, so I write a lot of things by myself. But particularly in my years in Nashville, because the Nashville model really is a numbers game, and so the more people you write with, the more your chances increase of of having songs out there and listen to. It depends. I've often heard people compare it to dating. It's like going on a blind date. And so some of them you click instantly with the other person. It's like, oh yeah, this is comfortable. We can chat and we can talk. And then some of them, in the first 5 minutes, this is a mistake. I shouldn't have ever come on this date. And so you have to wade through a lot of that. And I think, once you find those writing partners that you feel comfortable with, then, it after those first few times where you push past the fear of vulnerability, because you really do have to be vulnerable or it's just not going to be true. It's not going to feel true. And that's why I think when you find those great songwriting teams that work together for so long, they've gotten past that point of, I can say anything I want to say and you're not going to think I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of, and you have to be willing to be afraid to say stupid things in a writing session, because not everything's going to be great. But, we used to say it's not like brain surgery. If a brain surgeon makes a mistake, somebody's in real trouble. If a songwriter puts out a bad line, nobody's going to die that day. It's just going to be a bad line. So you have to kind of, put yourself in the right place in the universe as to what you're doing there. But it does take, it takes a bit of courage to begin to put it out there, particularly when you're young. I was watching a little local music show here last week where a young girl, she'll be a senior in high school this year, and we invited her to play 3 of her original songs that she did. And, she was nervous as a cat. And, we made the remark, she said, it's one thing to sit in my room by myself and write them. It's a whole nother thing to get up in front of people and put your heart on display there particularly when you're young and vulnerable. But she did a great job, and it was a very courageous thing for her to do.
Wow. When it comes to you personally, do you find just as much enjoyment in performing the song yourself, or as well as somebody performing it of a song that you've written?
Mm-hmm. If the song, some of the songs that I write do fit me, well enough for me to sing them, and I do enjoy singing them. I love to perform. I love to sing. During my Nashville years there, of course, there were things that I was writing for other people that would not have fit me to sing. They were specifically written in the style of somebody else, but I do enjoy, and I do look in the eyes of love quite a bit when I still perform out in public. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to link in the show notes. Is there footage of you performing that online anywhere?
I will see. I'm trying to think if it's on one of my records or not. I may not have put it on one of my albums, but again, I know on the old demo, but this demo is forever old. I know it's me singing the female version of it, so at least you'll have that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to hear it live at some point. That'd be cool. Be very
okay.
cool.
Yeah.
Going on from that, what is your life like now? What is your career now? How did that develop after the recognition and, the Grammy via your song and your songwriting? How did your life, how did that change the trajectory of your writing and your career then?
Well, those few years that I was at Polygram, and I think I only wrote for them 3 full years, but again, they were a major publisher, so there was a lot of push behind the songs. I had a song during that time cut by Faith Hill, which was not a single, but it was on a very successful album of hers. Mo Bandy did a song of mine during that time. There were some other songs I had cut during those periods. And again, the situation kind of changed. I started a publishing company with a business partner because I wanted to have a little more control over demos and pitching. And at that time, I was also trying to pitch myself as a recording artist to see if I could get a deal. And got involved in production, which I really, really love, really, really love. So over the course of 10 years, this publishing company, we signed 5 writers and never had any major label success, but really veered more off into what is now become the Americana side of country. But after, in Mississippi, in fact, we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary this year of that terrible, terrible hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, which hit the Mississippi Gulf Coast 20 years ago,
Wow.
and just tore up, a good bit of the area down there. And after that, I began to think about coming back to Mississippi from Tennessee. I did not know what I was going to do. When you talk about having a plan B,
Mm.
I really didn't have a plan B, but I just knew it was time for me to come home. And so, the university where I graduated, it's a small regional university, Delta State, which is here in Cleveland, Mississippi. I had heard that they were starting a recording and entertainment industry program. And the director that preceded me was a very successful engineer, producer, musician named Norbert Putnam. If you know that name, he did all of Dan Fogelberg's records. He did Margaritaville. He actually was the director for about a year, but he was going to leave the position. And so the university reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've started this program. Would you be interested in coming to interview to be the director? We've got plans, we're going to build a studio." And and I told the dean that hired me, I said, "Well, I'm a songwriter. I'm not a college administrator," but he convinced me that I would have a really good administrative assistant, which I did. So that was my opportunity to come back home. And everything I learned in Nashville for 26 years, everything about publishing, performing, production, management, all the ins and outs, I brought back with me. And over the course of those next 13 years, right up until the time COVID happened, I was the director of it's called the Delta Music Institute Entertainment Industry Program here. And so I was the director and very proud of what we built here. There's state-of-the-art studios, and students are coming here rather than leaving Mississippi right away to go to Tennessee. They can come and be educated here.
Yeah.
And so that was my life for the next 13 years. I retired from that right before COVID hit. And so today I'm a local volunteer. Cleveland, Mississippi has the only Grammy Museum outside of Los Angeles.
Wow.
It's called Grammy Museum, Mississippi. And it's built right on our college campus. Now, Cleveland, Mississippi is only about 11,000 people, and yet we have the only other Grammy Museum. So I served on the board for that and still volunteer there. We've developed a local live music scene called Deep Roots. The area that I'm in is a very agricultural part of the state, so there's a lot of farming here. And so we call it Deep Roots, and we try to book live local music in the restaurants 5 nights a week. And so I'm kind of the shepherd for that. That's what I'm doing. And I still play occasionally for local things and travel a little bit. But so that's what I'm doing now.
That is gorgeous. Oh, it's lovely to hear that it came full circle and now you're, encouraging and enriching those that may have similar dreams of when you started, which is really cool.
Absolutely. It's a blessing to be sure. And, if I'd had this program when I left Mississippi in 1980, it probably would have saved me about 6 or 7 years of trying to figure it out, because you had to figure it out on your own back then. And so, I'm very proud and very blessed to have been able to do that.
Oh, we'll have to put some Deep Roots links into the show notes as well for those listening who'd be curious to follow along. What's the best means if somebody wanted to reach out to you for somebody to contact?
Yeah, probably email. It's just info@bigfrontporch.com. That's my website, which is currently being updated a little bit, but my website is bigfrontporch.com. And that came from, I grew up in an old pre-Civil War house out in the country in this little town where I grew up. And it was built in the 1840s, and it had a very large front porch, but the metaphor is that there's room enough for everybody on the big front porch. And so that's my website, bigfrontporch.com.
Well, I've definitely felt very welcome talking with you today. It's been honestly really warm and rich to be speaking with you, especially about a song that I love and I know the Corrs community loves so dearly, even though it's a bonus, quote unquote, track. Thank you for sharing so eloquently your thoughts behind the track. That was really touching. And thank you for bothering to take the time on this project and for today. It's been honestly a joy to speak.
Well, it has been my pleasure and my delight to be here. And again, like we said at the front of the show, I apologize for not getting your message until a year later, but I'm a big fan of the Corrs. And again, I can't think of a group that I would have wanted even more to record Looking in the Eyes of Love. So thank you for letting me tell my story.
It has honestly been a pleasure. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day, and it was worth the wait.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thanks, Tricia.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It was a tremendous honour to have been given the chance to speak with Tricia, and I came away loving the song more, now knowing more about its origins and creation. In the show notes, you'll find a link to a photo of Tricia's Grammy Award contribution certificate, which she mentioned earlier in the show. If you wish to support this show financially, please consider joining other fans over at patreon.com/CorrsCast. Please leave a comment and subscribe if you are listening on the YouTube version of the show, and feel free to chat with others about each episode on the show's Discord. Links to this, as well as all the show's socials, can be found in the show notes or via www.CorrsCast.com. Again, thank you for listening. You've been listening to CorrsCast, and as always, keep on coring.